Today we'll be talking about chapter 31 from the textbook, and this chapter covers contemporary art around the world.
Contemporary art is a broad subject due to the variety of different ways to express your thoughts and feelings to the world.
To help simplify this complex time period, we'll be going over the six main categories that artworks of the contemporary era generally fall into.
These six categories are personal and group identities, political and science commentaries, representation and abstraction, new media, environmental and site-specific art, and finally, contemporary architecture.
Along with the six categories, we have a few vocabulary terms that may be useful to know when studying artworks within this time period.
First, we have deconstructivism, an architectural movement that encourages freedom of form and complex architectural structures rather than attention to conventional designs.
Next, we have social commentary, and this is the expression of one's point of view or feelings towards a society or societal issue, usually through literature or art.
Then we have new media, a movement that encourages artists to express their thoughts through new mediums and experimental techniques that were never seen before.
Our fourth term is environmental art. These are artistic works that are intended to enhance or become a part of the environment or make a statement on environmental issues.
Representation and abstraction are terms that refer to art and isn't a completely realistic depiction of the subject, and this gives the artist a significant amount of freedom in representational qualities that they would like to portray in their artworks.
And for our last term, postmodernism, is a rejection of the unadorned modernist aesthetic. This style became popular after the ending of World War II, and this type of style incorporates references of historical or ancient themes. An example would be the pyramids in front of the Louvre being a reference to the pyramids in Egypt.
Next, we have a list of artworks that we will cover soon in the following slides.
First, we have man smoking from the personal and group identity category. We also have gladiators from the political and social commentary section, as well as Big Family No. 2, also from the same category.
And we also have the Bleeding Takari 2 from the representation and abstraction category, the Gherkin from the contemporary architecture category, Bridging Home from the environmental and site-specific art, and finally the Crossing from new media.
Alright, so first we'll be starting off with the artworks in the personal and group identity category. Cultural diversity is a major topic of the modern world, so not surprisingly, this topic has made it into many contemporary artists' works of art and has become their primary focus throughout their major artworks.
This covers topics such as African American art, gender and sexuality, and cultural and national identities. Our first piece of artwork is a piece done by Carrie Mae Weems called Man Smoking from her Kitchen Table series.
She was an African American artist who used photography to show racial and social concerns. In this series, there are 20 different images in the collection along with 13 panels of text, each showing the everyday life of an African American family.
In this photograph, Weems, the artist herself, smokes a cigarette around the kitchen table with another man.
They're playing cards with each other, something similar to a family game night, and that symbolizes the normality and relationship in each American's everyday life.
Now we'll be moving on to our next piece in the section, Robert Mapplethorpe's self-portrait called Self-Portrait.
Art can be used to represent one's personal identity. Mapplethorpe was a gay photographer who was not afraid to show himself and his true identity within his pieces.
Mapplethorpe was actually involved in a mounting Cincinnati court case, one that would have allowed for artists to have the freedom of expression by showing his The Perfect Moment exhibition, which contained nude and homoerotic photographs.
A good example of this would be his own self-portrait, as shown on the slide. He is showing himself naked, vulnerable and open, looking into the audience.
Last in this category, we have Chris Ofili's The Holy Virgin Mary, an extremely large piece that is roughly around 8 by 6 feet. The large piece has to do with national identity and Ofili's choice of putting Nigerian figures at the forefront of his work.
His depiction of Mary strays afar from the Renaissance depictions of her. Here, she is pictured in a simple form in a golden heavenly space, with the face of an African American woman. And yet, We know this is a depiction of Mary because of her blue garments, which throughout history was a feature that defined who Mary was.
Surrounding her are images of butts and genitalia of both sexes. Even more outrageous was his choice of propping up the piece, sitting on 2 chunks of elephant feces and with a piece smeared on her right arm, which Ophelia saw as a connection to Africa.
As impressive as this artwork was, it brought major controversy with its creation. It was almost enough to close the exhibit.
Next, we will be moving on to political and social commentary. Many artists have used their artworks to bring light to political issues in the modern world.
This is often done with the idea of implementing or promoting change by informing the general populace about a given problem and appealing to people's sense of justice.
Our first piece will be Martha Rosler's Gladiators, one of the many in a series. Rosler's political commentary series, which was originally about the Vietnam War. However, this one came to be about the present war in Iraq, the gladiators being American soldiers.
This piece is an example of a photo montage, which is the process of making a composite photograph by cutting, gluing, rearranging, and overlapping 2 or more photographs into a new image.
The point of the series was to bring in harsh, real images into the peaceful, domestic, upscale home. This image holds a lot of opinions towards the war, which are obviously negative.
Honing in on the reality that a lot of Americans are not affected by the war because of the notion of near and far.
Our next piece in this category is Bloodline, Big Family Number 2. Bloodline portraits are generic portraits that did not depict specific people. The bloodline can be faintly seen in the otherwise almost grayscale-like piece.
This was relevant at the time because this piece was painted in Mao's China. This piece depicted the disapproval of the one-child policy that was present during the time.
A male was preferred over a female in order to carry on the family name, hence the baby being highlighted to show its importance.
Our next section will be representation and abstraction. Representation and abstraction helps artists to show and express themselves, as well as issues in the world.
The first piece is Jenny Savu's Branded. This piece is 7 by 6 feet, and this aspect was common among her many artworks. Her best known artworks were large self-portraits where she exaggerates the girth of her body.
This type of representational art being a form of modern art that retains strong references to the real world and particularly to the human figure, hence it being a figural piece.
Her piece was a commentary on the difference between beautiful and imperfect bodies. Words are inscribed into her body like delicate and petite, which is a direct notion to the idealized body type.
And this type of representational art was called figuralism, which was a dominant mode of expression because it is seen in connection with the most human thoughts and feelings.
The next piece we'll be discussing is The Bleeding Takari II by L. Anatsui. This massive work of art is an impressive 12 feet 11 inches by 18 feet 11 inches, so around 13 by 19 feet. This artwork was made out of bottle stops, copper wire, and weaving crushed and flattened pieces of scrap metal.
Anitsi made these types of hangings their own kind of genre, as they didn't fit into historians' labels.
This was abstract interpretation of the fraught networks of exchange between Africa, Europe, and America, since liquor was among the key currencies of the slave trade.
Next, we'll be discussing our next section, New Media. Contemporary artists often try to break away from the traditional styles and seek new mediums and techniques that were never used before in an attempt to push the boundaries of expressiveness.
This can include computer generations and videos to plants and animals.
Our first piece in this section is The Crossing by Bill Viola. This is a 2-video projection shown on 16-foot high screens.
The 2 videos shown simultaneously, a man surrounded in darkness appears and moves towards the viewer until he fills up the entire screen.
On one screen, water falls on the man's head.
The other screen, the man is engulfed in a raging fire, and finally everything returns to darkness.
This provides a deep sensory experience with the viewers to present a difference between the man and the viewer who is present in the physical realm.
Our next piece is an installation by Jenny Holzer.
Jenny Holzer studied art at Ohio University and then Rhode Island School of Design and became the first woman to represent the United States at the prestigious Venice Biennial Art Exhibition.
She is most known for her artworks that use light and LED displays. Her artwork was in the Guggenheim Museum in New York, and it included many portions of her other work, most notably the LED panels.
Each sign contains sentences that speak up against a multitude of different topics, such as abuse of power and unbalanced power dynamics in relationships.
The category we will be covering next is environmental and site-specific art. Recently, many works of art have been created on land and site-specific locations, and this has bridged the gap between architecture and sculpture.
These artworks have deep meaning and major ties to their locations, and that's what makes them special.
The first piece we'll be talking about in this section is The Surrounded Islands by Christo and Jean-Claude.
These islands were at Biscayne Bay in Miami, Florida, and they were made up of 6.5 million square feet of pink fabric that surrounded 11 small islands.
Christo started to study art in Bulgaria and then in Austria. After moving to Paris, he gained inspiration for this massive project when he first started to cover objects in wrappings.
In the end, this 2-week exhibit costed 3.2 million USD and took many years to prepare for.
Our next piece is The Bridging Home by Doha Soh, a former student at Seoul National University, Rhode Island School of Design, and Yale University.
His works of art were essentially autobiographies and symbolized events and feelings he had during certain portions of his life.
This piece in Liverpool symbolized the divide between his personal and professional life between Seoul and New York City.
The work of art tells a story about So's sense of rootlessness and displacement in New York City and how he felt extremely out of place when living there.
Our next category is contemporary architecture. Architecture has greatly expanded alongside the growth of modern technology.
Architecture is possibly the broadest category, containing painters, sculptors, and new media artists alike. Contemporary architecture, most notably in Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America, has grown the most.
The category of architecture can be split further into 3 sections: postmodernism, deconstructivism, and high-tech or green architecture.
First up, we have the Louvre design by Armenta. The massive steel and glass structure provides an entrance into the Louvre Museum.
When first suggested, the design brought up controversy, since the pyramid was originally thought to create a jarring and dissonant intrusion in the space, but quickly captured the curiosity and support of many.
It was inspired by the Egyptian stone architecture, and it also serves as a skylight to the underground portion of the museum.
Our next piece is Zaha Hadid's proposal for the Signature Towers, an example of deconstructivism.
It presents a new boldness to architecture and was designed by the first woman to win the Pritzker Architecture Prize.
It incorporates pure colors and abstract geometric shapes to express the supremacy of pure feeling and creative art.
The towers are bent in a way to symbolize motion and to make it look like they're dancing.
Our last piece is The Gherkin by Norman Foster. It was full of innovative and high-tech designs, such as a green solution to the construction of buildings.
For example, the tower's ventilated double skin reduces the need to heat the building in the winter and cool it down during the summer. Layers trap air to provide natural insulation. The reflective panels can also reflect light, keeping the building cool.
One of the most prominent green architecture buildings in the world.
In conclusion, we can see that there are practically no boundaries to what can be considered contemporary art. This is true for all the artworks we covered, and we can see how all these artworks can fall into more than one of the 6 aforementioned categories.
Hopefully you enjoyed our presentation and learned more about contemporary art.